Fitzgerald was fully named Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. He was also commonly known as F. Scott Fitzgerald, Scott Fitzgerald, Francis Scott Fitzgerald, and FSF. Often he worked in partnership with his wife, Zelda Fitzgerald. In the year 1890, Edward Fitzgerald and Mary McQuillan were married. In the 1896, they were blessed with a son, Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. His sister, Annabelle Fitzgerald, was born in 1901. Later, in the year 1920, Francis Scott married Zelda Sayre, and in 1921, they had a daughter, Frances Scott Fitzgerald, more commonly referred to as Scotty Fitzgerald. Francis Scott Fitzgerald was born on the 24th of September, 1896, in St. Paul, Minnesota. His sister Annabelle was born in July of 1901. F. Scott Fitzgerald first entered St. Paul Academy in July of 1908. His first appearance in print was in October of 1909. F. Scott wrote his first play in August of 1911 called The Girl from Lazy J. In September of 1913, F. Scott entered Princeton University, but in July of 1914, World War II began. F. Scott Fitzgerald met his first serious love interest, Ginevra King, in January of 1915. In November, he dropped out of Princeton for the remainder of his junior year, but returned in September of 1916. In October of 1917, F. Scott Fitzgerald was commissioned to the Army as an infantry second lieutenant. He met his future wife, Zelda Sayre, at a country club dance in July of 1918. Right before embarking to Europe, the World War ended, and F. Scott was discharged from the Army. He published his first novel, This Side of Paradise, on March 26th of 1920. He and Zelda were married on April 3rd, and the two took their first trip to Europe in the summer of 1921. On October 26, 1921, the couple was blessed with a daughter whom they called Scotty. On March 4, 1922, The Beautiful and the Damned, F. Scott's second novel, was published. Surprisingly enough, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote to Maxwell Perkins about a promising young American author, Ernest Hemingway. The publication of F. Scott's finest work, The Great Gatsby, was published on April 10th of 1925. Unfortunately, between April and May of 1930, Zelda suffered from her first emotional breakdown and was hospitalized just outside of Paris. Then, from May of 1930 to March of 1948, Zelda was hospitalized on and off in different mental institutions across the globe. F. Scott's father died in January of 1931, and when he returned to America to attend his burial, he reported news of Zelda's mental condition to her family. Zelda Fitzgerald published her novel, Save Me the Waltz, in October of 1932. F. Scott published his final novel, Tender as the Night, on April 12th of 1934. 2 years later, F. Scott's mother died. Deeply in debt, F. Scott Fitzgerald decided to go back to Hollywood for a third time to work with a 6-month MGM contract in July of 1937. His only screen credit for work on the script of Three Comrades took place between July of 1937 and February 1938. Shortly thereafter, Scotty Fitzgerald entered Vassar College in September. In February of 1939, F. Scott traveled to Dartmouth College to work on Winter Carnival, but was fired for his drunkenness and was hospitalized in New York. On September 1st of 1939, Germany invaded Poland and World War II began in Europe. Zelda was discharged from Highland Hospital in April of 1940 and began to live with her mother in Montgomery. But on December 21st of 1940, F. Scott died of a heart attack at Sheila Graham's apartment in Hollywood. He was buried at Rockville Union Cemetery. After the publication of The Crack-Up in August 1945, Zelda Fitzgerald died in a fire at Highland Hospital on March 10th of 1948 and was buried with F. Scott 7 days later. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote a massive amount of stories and plays. In addition, he wrote many articles and essays. Listed here are all of the books published by F. Scott Fitzgerald. He also wrote a number of works in verse. And of course, public letters and statements.